The Double Life of Veronique is a film that has followed me through my life. I remember the first time I watched it, I I was really young, actually. It was when I was first getting into film seriously, I guess, and I remembered it completely blew me away. And Kieslowski got me to kind of view the world in different alternate ways, deliberately, and kind of exposed me to the more metaphysical, entirely intuitive side of filmmaking. A kind of poetry visually that I didn't think was possible, and sonically too, because everything about the Double Life of Veronique is kind of sensual, tactile, and visceral. Uh, you can feel all of the different sensations that Veronique are experiencing. You know, from rain pouring on your head, from smelling a book, blowing its pages over, twirling a string around your hand, around your fingers, dust from the ceiling falling on your face, light taking you out of a slumber, making love, weeping for some unknown grievance. It's all there. It's all sensual, and Kieslowski, his direction, and Irene Jacobs, her performance, kind of compels you to experience all these different sensations with her. And part of that sensation is perception. She looks through rubber bouncing balls, or the film itself even opens with the world upside down, and we're constantly being shown these uh, distinctive, imaginative ways to view our lives. We are enabled to see and not always know. One of the most significant times I revisited The Double Life of Veronique, I was in the hospital. This was maybe a year or two ago, and I was in a very bad way. Um, I was very, I was not doing well. And this film came on Turner Classic Movies, the channel, at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And I remember watching it and contemplating the idea of soul, and how perhaps the soul is kind of defined by those sensations, by the touch, by the touch, not of reality, but of experience. I revisit this film once every few years. I just watched it again now. It's one of my 10 favorite films. And watching it now, I'm also realizing that Alexander, the puppeteer, is basically Kieslowski's double. The film is about two women of Veronica and Veronique who have a kind of intuition that they have a double, that there is another one of them out there in the world, and they're kind of linked in a metaphysical sort of poetic way, in a soulful way, truly. But the film is all about collaborative metaphors, rhyming images, you know, and the puppeteer, Alexandra, is certainly a double for Kieslowski himself. He urges Veronique to investigate the concept of the double. He is the one who shows her the picture that she took in Poland of her Polish double. Veronique is French, Veronica is Polish, and um, Veronica saw Veronique get on a tour bus in Krakow And unbeknownst to Veronique at the time, she was taking pictures outside of the window, and she ended up catching her double, Veronica. And it's Alexandra who sees this, and then Alexandra makes two different marionettes of Veronique, and begins to write a story about Veronique and her double. The film itself, if we can view the meta narrative and see how Kieslowski is playing with it, and kind of attach that symbolically to the puppeteer in the film, this film itself is a representation of his adoration, his love and fascination with Irene Jacobs, the actress, with the muse, right? He would use her later in Red. He was obviously very infatuated by her. And perhaps life is just a series of representations, representations of love. The Double Life of Veronique is a film that urges you to ask questions, that urges you to be uncertain, to face uncertainty, to embrace uncertainty. It's a film that does ask you to maybe initiate a correspondence with the ultimately dead or at least dying concept of a soul. We all have doubles. If you view the film metaphysically, your double is your soul, right? If you're kind of more postmodern in your sensibilities and in your kind of artistic interests and hyperfixations like me, um, the double is the film that you're actually watching. The double is every single frame that captures Irene Jacobs. It's every single time that Irene Jacobs smiles, winces, gazes. Her double is the film itself. The film itself is its own literal representation of Irina Jacobs, which actually says an awful lot about what film is for. Because I wouldn't call it an objectified exercise or even a narcissistic one, right? I think that this is a legitimately soulful and emotional representation of love, or of the capacity for soul to even kind of be captured within its own representation, which is film. Film, of course, is a composite of basically every other art form on the planet. This is a film that's guided by music, so it's sonically driven. The senses, like I said, you can feel everything by the way that Kieslowski photographed it. You can feel it, the sensations are there, they are more than visible, but speaking of visibility, it's about how you perceive your reality. Or is it your reality? It's the reality's double, the reality's representation held inside a rubber bouncing ball. The reality within that ball is turned upside down, but it doesn't make the representation any less representative or visceral, touchable, sensational. Representations of soul still have soul within them. And I think that maybe Kieslowski is the greatest filmmaker who can kind of blend two contradictory schools of artistic and philosophical thought. This is a postmodern mystical kind of film. There's mysticism and there's postmodernism, and it feels so enigmatic and mysterious and gravely uncertain. I want this film to always have a kind of shroud of mystery to it. I don't want to understand everything about this film. And I absolutely don't even think that's possible. I don't even think Kieslowski understands everything about it because it was so intuitive. There's so much intuition that goes into the design of this film. I think just about as much of it is impeccably and carefully constructed. There's just as much that is based on intuition. based on the moment, based on something you can't necessarily plan for, but you can certainly feel in a poetic and vague, but nonetheless extremely powerful sort of way. I think it's impossible, but I think the impossibility is possibility's representation, and I kind of love it for that. I think The Double Life of Veronique is easily one of the 10 greatest films ever made. It's one of my personal 10 favorite movies ever made because there is something that is so deeply poetic, deeply romantic, and deeply mysterious and uncertain about the whole film. It's a film that can captivate people who are searching for the meaning of life and those who know that life has no meaning. They capture both of those camps alike. I fall into the latter, of course. But meaning, even though I don't believe it exists, I don't believe life has meaning. Meaning is not intrinsic to life. To me, meaning is more like in a postmodernist or existentialist sense of meaning is just about pursuing narrative, and any meaning your life could have is a composite of the different kind of narratives you've attached to your own life that kind of give you purpose or satisfaction at the very least. But meaning still has representation. You can still represent meaning, and even if meaning is not actually an objective truth, the representation of it kind of represents its own truth, and then that truth exists outside of the weird dichotomy of meaning and meaninglessness, and it exists as something of a double. It exists as something that is truly soulful because it exists within its own perception of reality. That maybe within film, you can actually harness the more metaphysical concepts that would normally make me roll my eyes into the very back of my head through film. You can represent meaning, and that is better than truth. It is better than an objective reality because it's doubled, because it's uncertain, unknown, but sensational. Irina Jacobs did such a fantastic job in this film. This film is I believe it to be a representation of the director's love for her, and, every time I watch it, it's being represented once more and projected by my own adoration of Irina Jacobs in this film. She is a knockout, she is, drop dead gorgeous, sexy as all hell, but the pathos is unreal. Unreal. She can compel so many emotions from you. I'm talking about, like, the composition of Kieslowski making you feel every sensation and experience that Veronica or Veronique are feeling. 90% of that is because he knew that this woman, could transcend those kinds of, metaphysical struggles within cinema. Irina Jacobs can just look at something and I can feel her perception. I can feel what she's going through. I can feel her soul, you know, because I'm literally watching its representation in the Double Life of Veronique. What I'm saying is Irina Jacobs is one of the most incredible actors ever. And the Double Life of Veronique is why, because never have I ever watched a movie and felt every single thing that its heroine was feeling. Every single experience. From every single possible angle. I was there with her, and I felt everything with her. There's no double life of Veronique, there's triple lives, because I've lived it too. Every time. A representation of love, a representation of sensation. And this is a sensational film. Thank you for letting me just go on and on and on about it. I love it to death. I think it's incredibly important and more than poetic. I think that this best defines poetic cinema, you know, the uncertainty, the mystery of all good, tragically romantic poetry. It's here. Kieslowski's best film by a landslide, and Irina Jacobs, as I've said, most likely the best performance I've ever seen from an actress because it was so visceral, and I felt so much of it. So the to call it cathartic would be an understatement. Irina Jacobs was divine here in every sense of that loaded word. But I've been your cult boyfriend talking about the 1991 masterpiece, The Double Life of Veronique. In the comments, what do you think of The Double Life of Veronique? What's your favorite Kieslowski film? Do I have any Decalogue fans out there? What's your favorite of the Three Colors trilogy? To jump the gun and answer that question before someone asks it of me, I think I go with the standard ranking that most people go with, blue, red, and then white. I do love them all, and I do like Decalogue as well. But the Double Life of Veronique, I feel, is his masterpiece and also one of the greatest examples of how powerful and how emotional and how sensual cinema can be. How you can really touch a truly fabulous film. I've been touched by this film, but I've also touched it as well. It's experienced me, and I've experienced it. That right there is a double representation, and it's endless, and I love it. Kieslowski, beautiful job. It's one of the greatest films ever made. I'm Zach. I'm your cult boyfriend. Thank you for watching.